Hello, I'm Dango Rose. Welcome to the Mountaineer Podcast, where everybody's listening. The Mountaineer brings you the latest news of the Peak to Peak region, in print, online, through our podcast, social media, and special publications. Now, listen in to the latest news of the area with our local journalists.
Just outside of Canyon City, about a mile to the east, there's smoke on the ridgeline, black is black and big.
The song that you are currently listening to is called Wildfire. This is a tune written and performed by Connor Dady, member of the Denver-based band Cottonwood Drifters, who are coming to perform at Howlin' Wind Brewing and Blending very soon. Be sure to stay tuned for this episode to hear more about that performance. To learn more about the band and their musical efforts, be sure to check them out on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Hello there, everybody. My name is Jamie Lammers, and welcome to Music of the Mountains, where to be and what to see, brought to you by the Mountaineer Podcast. Before we get into today's interview, a couple of preliminary announcements. First, you might have been hearing some switch-arounds and some additions in our mid-rolls in particular. I'm trying to figure out which mid-rolls I need to edit in manually, so bear with me as I figure out those changes. Next, promotional announcements. If you haven't subscribed to The Mountaineer and you want to get news from peak to peak, then be sure to head to the mtnear.com and click on the subscribe button in the top right corner of our homepage. From there, you'll get full access to our digital archives and scanned copies of our physical newspaper. And you can choose to send a physical subscription to your mailbox or send it to the mailbox of someone that you love. If you're interested in being involved in the podcast and or the paper in any way, shape, or form, then please email info@themountaineer.com to contact our editor-in-chief, Barbara Hart, or media@themountaineer.com to contact myself, and we'll get something sorted for you. To learn more about what options are available for advertising, be sure to head to the mtnear.com/advertise. And finally, our top story today, brought to you by Brittany Wagner.
Our top story today comes from Christopher Kelly. Netherlands cements natural medicine regulations. The Planning Commission met on Wednesday, June 25th, 2025, to give their final vote on Ordinance 876, which amends municipal code to formally adopt regulations on the use of natural medicines and the operation of licensed health centers within the town of Netherlands. Ordinance 876 was written to adhere to the Natural Medicine Health Act, or the NMHA, which was approved by the state of Colorado in 2022 and includes term definitions for related psilocybin administering centers and cultivation businesses. It also relates to Proposition 122, which decriminalizes the use, possession, and growth of certain natural medicines. You can read the full story in this week's Mountaineer or at themountaineer.com.
Thank you, Brittany, for our top story today. Now let's get into today's interview. Our guest this time around, do you mind introducing yourself real quick?
Yeah, my name's Connor Dady. I'm currently 1/5 of the Cottonwood Drifters, Americana bluegrass band based out of Denver, Colorado, and we have been playing music audiences since 2021.
And you guys are coming to the Peak to Peak area very soon to play at Howlin' Wind.
Yeah, we're really excited to play at Howlin' Wind. You know, the more we've been gigging around the Front Range and kind of making a name for ourselves and our sound, it's nice to have people reach out to us for these gig opportunities, and that's exactly what happened over at Howlin' Wind. I've been familiar with them and what they've had going on up there for a little while now, and we're really excited at the opportunity to come up to the Peak to Peak and play some music.
So Connor, can you tell us a little bit more about your musical background? How did you get started in music and developed your musical tastes and playing style into what it is now?
Yeah, so my original roots brought me out here from upstate New York, Rochester, New York to be specific, in 2011. And I was working as an arborist at the time, climbing trees and trimming trees. And that's when I met up with my counterpart, Dan Williams. Dan is originally from Austin, Texas. And we both kind of made our way to Denver around the same time and started working together at the tree company. And both realized we had some very similar interests in music. And both were kind of playing a little bit at the time, mostly just doing open mics around town. And then we kind of started joining forces and doing some open mics together and just kind of bringing new music to each other's experience. For as much of the same music that we share as far as what we like to listen to, we both brought totally different music to each other's playing styles. So Dan and I started doing open mics together in about 2011, and we just kind of would do, the campfire jam for friends and the occasional backyard jam at some house parties. And it wasn't actually until 2000, ironically COVID time, that we thought maybe we should try to find some other people to round out the sound a little bit and see if we can start getting some gigs. So I would say probably towards the end of 2000, we had a few folks join us that we had met through various resources, upright bass player, fiddle player, and eventually a dobro player. And we started looking for gigs, and we found that there was opportunities around Denver for venues and folks that were looking for the sound that we could provide, which I would say, I don't describe this as bluegrass because we've all seen enough bluegrass to know what it is and what it isn't. So I like to say we're bluegrass adjacent with a little more of an Americana background. And then we even sprinkle in some traditional Irish folk in there and a little bit of blues as well from time to time.
By 2000, I assume you meant 2020.
Yeah, exactly. 2020. And then Dan and I both grew up with musical backgrounds. My father and my uncle back in New York actually played traditional Irish and Americana music and folk music for a living for about 40 years, touring around the state of New York and up and down the East Coast, and made a pretty good name for themselves doing that. And so I really started out at a young age as a roadie for them and kind of touring around and learning the scene. And as much as the music, just how to approach people in that industry and how to talk to people. And so music was always a big part of my family, always has been and continues to be till this day. I honestly look at what we are doing now as a passing of the torch in a way and carrying on a tradition. My father still plays music back in New York, and here we are, 1,500 miles away out in Colorado playing some of the songs that he wrote when he was 18 years old. I think one of the coolest things we do is Dan's father also grew up playing music, so Dan was exposed to it a lot, and we each play one of our father's songs for most of our gigs. Very different style songs, but both songs are songs that each of our fathers wrote when they were probably about 18, 19, kind of backpacking around the country, figuring out their way in the world. And it's really cool to kind of hear them back to back and how different the styles are, but how much the stories correlate.
By the way, that duo is John and Joe Dady, who played together as the Dady Brothers. As Connor will talk about later, John still plays in New York, and you can learn more about his musical efforts by going to dadybros.com. But back to Cottonwood Drifters. Who's the current lineup of the band, and what are some of their musical backgrounds?
Yeah, and I guess I should preface this by saying, as with most bands, there is turnover over the years. I've found, since we started doing this, I think finding people with common goals and the ability to share their artistic talents and get a finished product out of it, it can be a tricky thing. And so our current lineup that we have had for about the last year now is myself, Connor Dady. I play lead acoustic guitar and lead vocals. Dan Williams, my counterpart. Dan plays mandolin and also sings lead vocals. Dan will also from time to time switch off and play a Irish tenor banjo, a 4-string banjo, for a lot of the more traditional Irish tunes that we play. We have a full-time fiddle and dobro player named John Bush, who's based out of Denver. John is pretty well known in the local Denver bluegrass scene and the picker circles. He likes to host bluegrass picks at his house in Lakewood. So he's pretty tied in with a lot of the good bluegrass scene that we have in Denver and Golden there. And then we have a bass player. His name is Stacy Lyles. He plays the upright bass. Stacey Hales, originally from Arkansas. I think he's been in Colorado for about 15 years now. Stacey is also very well tied into that Front Range bluegrass scene, and we're all frequenters of Rocky Grass up in Lyons every year, and so we've done a lot of good networking that way, and that's actually how I met Stacey. And then our last member, his name is John Sudacum, and John is originally from Chicago. John plays acoustic guitar with us, but he plays more lead on that, and kind of will put it through some pedals to get some nice effects going on some of our songs. And then John will also switch off and play a 5-string banjo, but not in the traditional bluegrass sense. He plays more of a frailing style with that 5-string banjo. So between all 5 of us, Dan and I have usually taken over the singing responsibilities for most of our gigs, and we have just recently started trying to incorporate everybody into that. We like to give that opportunity to whoever wants to do it, and some of the other members have been bringing songs to the mix that they like to sing, and we're happy to do it, and it just kind of rounds out that sound and even gives us the opportunity to do some nice 4-part harmonies on some of the songs we sing.
I've heard a lot of people in the bluegrass music scene, whether they're listeners or players, talk about modern bluegrass, otherwise known as newgrass. Would you categorize your music in any way as newgrass?
You know, I am familiar with the newgrass movement. It's still a little hard for me to subscribe to that. I have nothing wrong with people categorizing us that way. It's an honor. We all listen to a lot of newgrass. But yeah, I would say we could probably be put into that newgrass category. It's just that so many of our influences are so broad. It's such a broad net of influences that we all bring to the table. But I would say even for if we're doing a Jason Isbell cover or a Grateful Dead cover, we are kind of putting that grass twist on it.
And from what I'm hearing about how the band has come to be, it sounds like you and Dan are the core members of the band. The members that have always been consistent through all of the lineup changes.
We have, yep. Dan and I consider him my partner in crime, and even with all the changes over the years, you've always got to have somebody driving the ship. And I think Dan and I have done a really good job of sharing that responsibility. And that is a tried and true lesson that I learned from my father and my uncle playing together for 40 years. You know, they were brothers. So there was nights where, you know, they maybe didn't agree on something when it came to the business side of things. But when it came to putting on the performance, they set all that aside and they just went into performance mode to put on the best performance they could for the people they were playing for. So I would say, yes, Dan and I are definitely the two that are keeping the train on the track.
I want to get more into the songwriting process for the band and the performances of the band as a whole. But before we get into that, a quick break. This episode of the Mountaineer Podcast is sponsored by Regional Air Quality Council, the Front Range's lead air quality planning organization. RAQC collaborates with state governments, organizations, and individuals to improve air quality and protect Colorado's health and environment through planning, policy development, and program implementation. The RAQC's current priority is ground-level ozone, the Front Range's most pressing air quality issue. For more information, please visit raqc.org. To learn more about ground-level ozone, what individuals can do to protect their health, and how to help improve our summer air quality, please visit simplestepsbetterair.org. You can also sign up for timely text or email alerts on this website to know when it matters most. Welcome back. Let's get back to the interview. What's writing songs been like for you ever since you started, and how has it developed ever since Dan became your partner in crime?
So back to my high school days when I started playing with bands, it was definitely more of a punk and metal kind of vibe that I was into. And so my writing style, I would say, has definitely changed over the years. But I do go back to some of the things I wrote at that time in my life that I never necessarily put to music. They were just stories I wanted to tell that I never really got to tell. And I've actually been able to revive those songs and complete them now with the band, specifically with Dan. I would say Dan and I do most of the writing that we do, and we have very different styles. We haven't done a lot of co-writing together. Basically, the way that we will handle that is if I have an idea, I will bring it to him with an open mind, and I will say, no judgment. I'm an open book. What do you think of this? Should we speed up the tempo? Should we slow it down? Maybe switch up the key? So a lot of the co-writing that we do, probably that would be the best way to describe it. What I do when I get an idea or a song idea, I definitely will take a voice memo on my phone and record it so I don't forget the idea, and I will come back to it later. I tend to write my lyrics. I tend to write the story first with a melody in mind. and then I'll try to work it out that way. And that's been my most successful way of getting a song finished. I think a lot of writers and a lot of artists, you can fall into this trap of writing a third of a song or half of a song, and you get stuck in this, I guess you could call it writer's block, where you can't quite finish it. And so I'll set that one down and I'll come to another one. And sometimes it's just like magic, where I come into this next song fresh, the one that I haven't worked on in a while, and all of a sudden it just clicks. And I'm like, that song's done now. I don't need to think about it again. It's done. And so, yeah, I would say we have about 10 original songs now that we play. And then any given gig that we play, a lot of the gigs we've been playing tend to be about 3-hour sets, which is a lot of time to fit a lot of music into. So, over the course of about 30 songs that we might play in 3 hours, usually about 10 of them are original songs.
And how do the other band members contribute to the songwriting process?
Yeah, a lot of the songs that I write, Jamie, it's a lot of life experiences that I like to write about. I don't use a lot of simile and metaphor. I just am kind of to the point about whether it's travels or different career choices that I've made. There's always going to be the tale of love and love lost. I think every artist gets at least one of those songs to write. So I had an experience a few years back that gave me a lot of time to think about that relationship, and I think a great song came out of it. As far as the collaboration side of it, like I said, Dan and I will do most of the writing up front. I will send a scratch copy to the rest of the band and kind of be like, hey, this is what I'm working on. This is the key. This is the tempo I would like. And then we try to get together for rehearsals once a week or every other week. And we will just kind of take that time to work through all the new material. We've played enough gigs now that the songs that we play on the regular basis, we can kind of put those on the back burner. So we always like to try to keep it fresh, whether it's originals or covers. We're always trying to kind of swap stuff out and keep it fresh.
And what's been fun for you about being able to write these songs, play them with a band, and share them with a massive group of people?
Yeah, so if I could just back up a little bit to my background and growing up with my father and my uncle and being around the scene. When I was coming up as a 16, 17-year-old and playing the guitar and kind of learning my way, I had so many ample opportunities to get up and sit in with my dad and my uncle. They were very welcoming and would always try to get me up, and I always kind of had this stage fright. I never thought I was good enough, and they just had so many professional musicians as friends, and I just kind of had this mindset of who am I to take that spot or that offer above these other folks? And unfortunately, in 2019, my Uncle Joe, who was my dad's partner, he passed away in 2019. And his last words to me were, keep doing the music. You've got a good thing going. And that was the motivation that put me over the edge. Even being out here in Colorado and so distant and so far away from home, that was really the driving force that was I can do this. If he believes in me, I can do this. And even at that time, I didn't think we were going to be playing songs that my dad and my uncle wrote. I'd heard them so many times growing up. It was almost even a little embarrassing having my dad be so well known around town. And it wasn't the music that I was into at the time. And so it was kind of this full circle moment for me in 2019 into 2020 when Dan and I started talking about putting this together, and playing their songs just kind of trickled into the mix like that. It just kind of happened. And so it's been really special for me. There's also something about playing in front of friends and family back home that is almost more nerve-wracking versus playing for 150 to 200 strangers in a new state where I've made my home, because I'm kind of creating my own story. And so that's been really cool. And then one other thing I'll say is when Dan and I started playing, he was playing acoustic guitar and singing. I was playing acoustic guitar and singing. When COVID hit and we had a lot more time on our hands, Dan took the initiative to learn the mandolin. He took online lessons through Swallow Hill in Denver. I can't remember the name of his teacher, but he had a great teacher. And he's a great picker. And so we would get together week after week, and he would bring these traditional Irish tunes to my house for us to work on. He'd be like, this is what I learned this week. This is how I'm kind of working on my rolls. And I had never thought to play traditional Irish tunes, but it was ingrained in me. And so I started hearing these tunes, and even though I'd never played them, I knew the melody and I could just kind of pick it up. Whereas I don't think that type of music comes naturally to everybody. And I thought that was really cool because Dan didn't have that Irish music upbringing the way that I did, coming from Austin, Texas. He was raised on a little more psychedelic surf rock and punk rock. And so for him to bring bring that without me even, so unexpectedly. It just kind of was meant to be. And so we've incorporated some traditional Irish reels and jigs into our set as well. And I thought that was really cool to do that.
And what's it been like with the shifts in lineup over the course of Cottonwood Drifter's run?
We've had great experiences with all the members we've had over the years. There's a personal conflict here and there or a musical disagreement on how to move forward with things. And I will credit all the people that we've played with over the years because they've all allowed us to take steps in a better direction, whether it was with the music or trying to be better about how we communicate with people. But I will say that the lineup that we have now, the 5 of us, I feel like is the best lineup that we have had yet. And one of the bands I was raised on was The Band. They're one of my dad's favorite bands. And for as great as the music was, I think what my dad appreciated most was the musicianship and how well they played together and not over each other. And so that is something that with this group, I feel like we all fall in line. And back to what I was saying about incorporating everybody's skills, I didn't know some of these guys could sing when they first joined the band. I think they just assumed like Connor and Dan are going to do all the singing. But the more I asked them, the more we communicated. And I was like, hey, do you guys have any songs you want to bring to the mix? We have other members like our guitar player, John Sadecum, who he has a rich musical background coming from another band that disbanded before he joined us. And we're bringing in some of his original stuff now. So I just think the current lineup we have and everybody's willingness to take a step back for the other member and to bring whatever they can to enhance that sound, I think is what we have now. And it's just really fun to be part of.
Is there anything you hope people will take away from your shows or your music when they come to see your performances?
I hope when people come see us that if they hear us play a cover of a Grateful Dead song or a band song or a Billy String song, that people walk away from it knowing that we're not trying to copy anything. We're just trying to cover it and put our twist on it and give it its due respect. The comments that I get most frequently are in relation to the wide repertoire that we cover as well as our originals. And then on top of that, I think our voicings and our ability to harmonize, we put a lot of effort and concentration into getting good harmonies and finding a spot for everybody to fit in that vocal range. So I just want people to have fun. The thing that makes me the happiest is when people dance to my music. I feel like that's one of the truest expressions of enjoyment when it comes to music is when we can get people to dance, and we're getting there. Every show there's a couple. We try to encourage more, and yeah.
Is there anything else in general about the band or any other efforts that you want to promote?
Yeah, I will say we are really excited to be playing at Howlin' Wind. We have been making our way kind of around the brewery and smaller club scene of Denver and the outskirts of Denver. And there are so many great venues and so many great opportunities for music up and down the Front Range and across Colorado. There's a rich musical experience in this state. And so for right now, we did a couple studio tracks this spring, but we have not released them yet because we didn't have all 5 members yet. So we were working on potentially trying to overdub some parts on those tracks and get some singles released. We recorded 5 original tunes. And I would say by the end of this year, we will be looking to have our first LP up on Spotify before the end of the year. As far as other events coming up, if that's the kind of thing that you would like to promote, we do have some upcoming gigs, mostly in the Denver area. This Howlin' Wind gig is the next one that we have on the calendar, which is July 12th up at Howlin' Wind. And we'll be playing 4 to 7 p.m. up there. And then that following week, which will be July 18th, we are playing the Tennyson Street Fair in Denver. And that's another evening show from 6 to 9. And then that Saturday, July 19th, we are playing in Colorado Springs at Westfax Brewing to celebrate their 1-year anniversary. So that will be afternoon gig, I believe, 4 to 7 for Westfax in Colorado Springs. And then we've got some more stuff coming up on the calendar, but not until August and September. And we promote everything on Instagram and Facebook. And then most of our live content right now is we have live videos on our YouTube channel as well.
And yeah, I think those are all the big questions on my end, unless there's anything else you want to add.
No, I think we covered a lot. I mean, we could talk all day. I just wanted to say I really appreciate you reaching out to ask us all these questions and to get the information and help promote this gig at Howlin' Wind. It seems like you're doing a lot of good work over there at the paper, The Mountain Ear, Music of the Mountains, and we really appreciate you taking the time to get to know a little more about us.
That is very much appreciated. Thank you so much, Connor, for coming on board and joining us for Music of the Mountains. If you want to see the Cottonwood Drifters performing live in the Peak to Peak area, then be sure to head to Howlin' Wind Brewing and Blending, located at 51A Main Street in Rollinsville, on Saturday, July 12th, 2025, starting at 4 p.m. You can keep up with the band on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in to this week's Music of the Mountains, Where to Be and What to See, brought to you by the Mountaineer Podcast. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the podcast. In the meantime, if you want to share this episode or others around with whoever you see fit, then be sure to head to the mtnear.com and scroll near to the bottom of the home page to see a full archive of all of our episodes. Or head to our podcast's main hub at the mtnearpodcast.buzzsprout.com. If you're interested in being involved in the paper and or podcast in any way, shape, or form, including advertising, then be sure to reach out to info@themountaineer.com and or media@themountaineer.com, and we'll get something sorted for you. And finally, you can find all of our most important links in our individual podcast episode descriptions, including our Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and events calendar where you can submit your venue's events. And you can also find those links on the top right side of our homepage. I'll see you guys very soon for our next episode. Have a great rest of your day.
Grab your bike, grab your skis, yeah, we're heading for them trees. And don't forget old Blue, you know she's howling at the moon. We're all driven by this need to go downhill at full speed. On two wheels or on a board, you know I'm setting myself free from the shackles of the city life. Droning voices day and night. Light pollution clouds my view from seeing what is right. Mountains call. Let's go to the land that prays for snow.
The song that you are currently listening to is called The Land That Prays for Snow. This is a tune written and performed by Connor Dady, member of the Denver-based band Cottonwood Drifters, who are coming to perform at Howlin' Wind Brewing and Blending very soon. You can see them at 51A Main Street in Rollinsville on Saturday, July 12th, 2025, starting at 4 p.m. To learn more about the band and their musical efforts, be sure to check them out on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube.
The most telling sign I found is when that white stuff starts to fly, we pile in and make the drive. Work days on with memories and steep lines in our eyes. Mountains call, now let's go. Snow, where the good times flow like water to the valleys down below. Just give me shoots and trees and backbones, please, and champagne powder to our knees, double blacks and simple greens, and all the hiking in between, endless turns with all our friends.
And that's it for our show. Subscribe online to get more access to more news, weekly updates to our community calendar, and a link to our YouTube channel by visiting themountaineer.com. Be sure to use the coupon code PODCAST when subscribing for a 10% discount, only available to our listeners. If you are in the local Peak to Peak area, be sure to pick up a print edition of The Mountaineer at a local business. I'm Dango Rose. Thank you for listening.